Caution: if you are sensitive to bright flashing lights, please take proper precaution if you plan to continue this video. After much deliberation, I've decided I'm just going to say it outright. Twin stick shooters are one of my favorite types of game to play. I don't know what it is, but I think maybe it has something to do with the fact that I'm not completely garbage at them. Back in the early days of the Switch, I slept on too many good ones, and so I made a promise to myself to never let that happen to me again. Which brings me to today's game I'll be reviewing. It came from Space and Ate Our Brains. It's a new title to the eShop as of January 28th, 2020. Developed by All In Games and is listed currently at $14.99 American. It's categorized as an action arcade multiplayer party game, and I would say that's a fairly accurate description, as long as your idea of a party is fighting off brain-sucking aliens. It came from space and ate our brains. I don't care what you are or where you're from, you ain't eating my brain. And I don't appreciate the thought of my brain being someone's snack. But then again, what do I know? I mean, it is my own brain thinking these things. Well, the first thing you'll notice when starting up ICFSAAOB, and that's It Came from Space and Ate Our Brains for the layman, the first thing you'll notice is a basic clean menu with a background showcasing some of the environments and assets in the game. Oh, it's like a little slideshow of the landmarks you're about to see firsthand. That's because each location shown is an area of the game you can eventually play. That is, once you unlock them. And you unlock a single new level by beating the one previous to it, so it's pretty simple. There are two game modes, Campaign and Survival, which are pretty self-explanatory in their respective functions. Campaign mode takes you through 6 semi-lengthy levels, and I think each one took me about 20 minutes or so. And Survival pits you against waves and hordes of enemies until the game tells you you've won. I honestly have no idea how to keep track. I didn't see any counter or number in the corner or really any indication of how many waves I would face, just a notification when a new wave was coming. So you just kind of keep shooting until the waves of aliens stop coming. I mean, it's fine, but it's there, and it does incorporate new levels and environments you don't experience in the campaign, like boarding up on the alien spaceship, so there's that. The problem is it's a bit lackluster. It's slow, repetitive, and that's compared to the campaign anyway. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is the campaign is more my cup of tea here. Shout out to my tea drinking colleague, Tom. Here's how a typical level in that campaign mode works. You appear in the beginning of the level with no enemies yet. You'll navigate through a small bit of the level, and then that's when the enemies start spawning. Best I could tell, there's no end to their spawning as you travel throughout the level, so my recommended strategy is to kill enough to clear a safe path and then keep it moving. The enemies, which are the brain-sucking aliens, will typically appear one of two ways. Either just completely out of thin air at random, which can be a little annoying at times as it feels a bit cheap, or they'll show up in specified intervals indicated by a bright pink flash of light. These areas are usually just before a safe room, or just before making it into the final segment of a level, in which you obliterate a giant alien egg in a light show of dazzling eggshell fragments. Oh, and side note, while we're on the subject, just a bit of a warning or disclaimer, with safety in mind of course, I would not recommend this game to anyone with a sensitivity to flashing lights, because there is quite a bit of them, so stay safe out there y'all. So, however the enemies decide to rear their ugly mugs, they will always make their way crawling towards you, and they seem to gain speed the closer they get to you. There's a couple of talking points here. One, simply touching enemies typically won't cause you to take damage. The aliens actually have to show their attack animations, which may be a very small detail, but is honestly a breath of fresh air for a twin stick shooter. And two, there are multiple styles of enemies, I want to say 5, which can be identified by their character models in-game. So here's a quick description. There are the smallest ones who don't glow until they're basically right next to you about to strike. Then you have what I consider to be sort of the base model enemies who move at a relatively slow pace and whose faces glow no matter where they are. They are the most noticeable, the most abundant, and just as easy to kill as the smallest ones, which is typically 1 or 2 shots depending on your weapon, which we'll talk about in a bit. Next, There are the most annoying buggers, which sort of look like a wishbone and dodge bullets like a freaking agent from the Matrix or something, and I'm not kidding. Luckily, the shotgun has a spread that'll make quick work of them. Fourth, there are the ones that, for no apparent reason, I thought of as the rabid dogs of the bunch. Basically, they poise themselves and then try and pounce on you. They're sneaky too, but with any twin stick shooter, as long as you don't stay still for too long, they're not a huge threat. Remember, keep it moving. Lastly, and my personal favorite, the giant boys. They're comically larger than all the rest, and the first time you see one, you'll probably have a mini heart attack. But at the end of the day, they're just big teddy bears that, admittedly, can soak up quite a few bullets. Let's talk graphics. The graphical style of It Came From Space and 8 Our Brains is one of which I particularly enjoy. Simple 3D, voxel-like characters, monochromatic backgrounds with just enough artistic detail to get a feeling for the environment, which is mainly bleak, and a huge emphasis on bright colors. This specifically being the burst of weapon blasts and glowing faces of the enemies. Also, breakable boxes which hold power-ups and destructible pieces of the environment will also glow as well, which is a nice touch to distinguish those from everything else. Okay, I've teased you enough though, let's talk weapons. By pressing the L button during the game, it will bring up a radio display showing the potential weapon options. I feel this whole idea wasn't explained well enough anywhere in the game. I had no idea as to the extent in which you can purchase and upgrade a multitude of weapons. This ranges from your starting blaster, which has a relatively low fire rate, area of damage, range, and power, to say a missile launcher, which, though still maintains a slow firing rate, has an enormous impact and staggering power. There's also a laser gun and a couple varieties of single-shot blasters, but my two personal favorite weapons would have to be the shotgun and the green blaster. I don't really know what the name of it is, but it shoots green. The shotgun has a spread that, when upgraded, can take out small waves of enemies with a single shot and maintains a fairly steady firing rate. The green blaster shoots out large, glowing projectiles that don't disappear. What I mean is, their range appears to be endless. Call it overpowered if you will, but when upgraded, this blaster shoots 3 at a time with a very fast firing rate. You can mow down full rooms of enemies with bright green flashes of deadly light in a matter of seconds. And sometimes this is exactly the type of firearm you need. Lastly, I want to quickly mention the sound and soundtrack, or rather lack thereof. Usually, to me, music tends to be a very minor talking point in games, and I mean no offense to any composers out there, but what I mean is there are few that are made and implemented in-game in a way that makes them stand out, to be a focal point of the game. And unfortunately, It Came From Space and 8 Our Brains is another victim of one such situation. In the times there is background music, it is rather subtle and forgettable. However, when there is an absence of music, the constant sound of blasts and explosions, while appropriate, tend to become a bit of a nuisance, a constant ringing in your ear that made me want to stop spamming the shoot button at times. Just know, if you came for an orchestral masterpiece, it won't be here. As per usual, now that I've shared some thoughts on the game, I'll give you the condensed version in the form of our joys and cons.
Joys.
It's a twin stick shooter. I know, my bias is showing, but the controls are good, solid, responsive, and lightning fast. The artistic aesthetics. I really enjoy minimalism and how they emphasize pops of color. Weapon options. I really enjoy the different weapon choices and upgrades available. Each upgrade truly feels like you're more powerful, with visible screen shakes from blasts and noticeable recoil in your character's movement. Consumables. There are some single-use items that you can find in destructible pieces of the environment that will give you some pretty cool effects, like a shield or a turret. Local co-op. There's an option to play multiplayer with up to 4 players locally. It's as simple as pressing A to join in a game, and that's got to be prior to starting a level. It doesn't change up the game so much, but it does add a new dynamic of teamwork, allowing players to revive their teammates by standing over them for a short period of time.
Cons.
Lack of story. Again, another personal bias, but it balances out the other one. There are no cutscenes, dialogue, means of tracking story progression, or anything, besides unlocking a new level, which doesn't necessarily represent story advancement. Game progress, sure. The best I can gather, in a few levels you'll see something like a train or a plane go by, and then later in that same level it'll be crashed with a dead NPC near the accident, with it being assumed that the aliens were the ones responsible. This is the only form of what could possibly be loosely interpreted as narrative. Lack of music. I spoke on this and stand by my point. There's nothing composed in game that is implemented to stand out as a focal point, but rather exists to blend in as something that simply fills the void of silence. Survival mode. For lack of a better term, it is boring. Perhaps with a full 4-player multiplayer, it may be a little more fun, but that's not so much the game, but rather having the company with you to make it interesting. Difficulty scaling. There are different difficulty options in the game. The only thing that changes is the rate at which the enemies spawn and how spongy they are. I don't believe this is the best way to implement a more challenging experience. Okay, I hope these joys and cons were enlightening and helped you decide that if maybe It Came from Space and Ate Our Brains is a game that you'd enjoy. Time for some closing thoughts. This indie title from All In Games is a short, relatively enjoyable twin-stick shooter with limited replay value. There's only so many times I can go back in, trying to increase a score, but I don't just want to end with a judgment and not offer solutions. So here are a few suggestions I'd like to throw out there that would help maintain interest for me personally. 1. An achievement system. I'm going to be honest, I don't really care about trophies and all that, but there is a proven science to things being more addictive when there is a reward system. If, while playing, there were achievements consistently popping up or challenges to engage in, I know subconsciously I would be more inclined to keep playing, even post-game. 2. A revamp of the survival mode. Some games do survival mode very well, and others not so much. If there were maybe certain gimmicks implemented, like say a timed section, that maybe something was going to blow up unless you kill all these aliens in a certain amount of time, or saving an NPC, some sort of stakes in the survival, other than your own life, I feel that would provide more motivation for the player. 3. Recreate the difficulty increases and why it's tougher, not just sponginess. As the difficulty level increases, there should be additional challenge to the game. Consider adding time limits or different enemies. They could even just be reskinned, that maybe move in a slightly different way or just faster. Maybe change up their spawn points or impose gun limitations, such as you can only use the shotgun in this level or something like that. Sponginess isn't fun. All that being said, and everything taken into consideration, I'm awarding It Came from Space and Ate Our Brains the Nindie Nexus Half Heart Award. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review and keep coming back to Nindie Nexus for more great Nindie content, either here on YouTube or at our website nindienexus.net. Please, if you liked this video, hit the thumbs up. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. Consider subscribing. And remember, my name is Mikey, and I'll see you next time.